right, throughout this week, among other things, we've been talking about a development of a two-tiered system of justice that's taking place in our country. And many of us, in fact, I'm sure many of you viewing and listening right now, you've sensed this taking place for quite a while. But more recently, concrete proof has emerged to verify our suspicions. Most recently this week, the House Judiciary Committee released documents confirming that the FBI targeted churches with confidential sources and at least one undercover agent. Well, joining me now to discuss this is Kyle Seraphin. He's a former FBI agent, and he's the initial whistleblower who brought so many of these revelations to light about a politicized FBI. So, Kyle, welcome to Washington Watch. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Okay, so let's begin. Let's maybe just step back a little bit. Earlier this year, an FBI memo was exposed that detailed attempts to infiltrate Catholic churches in Virginia. We all know about that by this time. And the FBI immediately tried to distance themselves from the memo. In fact, Attorney General Merrick Garland testified before the Senate that the FBI doesn't target Christians, that they don't target churches. But now we have new documents this week that reveal that, in fact, a memo that reveals that the FBI did, in fact, have an effort to infiltrate churches. Is that your understanding as to what happened?
Yeah, it sure is. Unfortunately, I did another review of the initial documents that we had, which were an intelligence domain product. It was an awareness product saying that there was a potential susceptibility of Catholics at the traditional Latin Mass to be recruited by white supremacists, which is a sort of absurd statement for anybody who knows anything about Latin Mass Catholics. But, when we did another review of this, and I looked at it with another intelligence professional who had 2.5 decades of experience, the reread kind of indicated that not only was the document generated by an undercover employee of the FBI, not just a source, but an employee, like a W-2 paid government employee, but it was also likely the actual author of the intelligence product, the intelligence analyst, who I guess decided to go kind of Jack Ryan on this thing and went out to go find that out. And that lined up with the information that we had about who this person was, because he's a young intelligence analyst who graduated from Georgetown University, a Catholic university. So some of the inside baseball about Catholicism and sort of the church politics, if you will, it didn't really line up with source information unless somebody was really, really up on this kind of stuff. So it is my belief that not only what Jordan said, they were a little bit shaky on the intel, whether there was a approved operation or an actually executed operation. And I believe it was actually executed.
Wow. All right. So let's get into the exact terminology of the informant, the FBI informant was type 5, what's it called? Type 5 analysis or
assessment.
Assessment, type 5 assessment. All right, explain that to us in layman's terms so we can understand what this FBI agent was actually there to do.
So there's 3 types of investigative activities that the Bureau engages in. Type 1, the first one is an assessment. That's the lowest level. The second is a preliminary investigation. And the third is a full investigation. And those are the kind of terms as they're laid out in the Attorney General guidelines, known as the DIOG. The assessment is the lowest level, but the type 5 is particularly concerning because the purpose of a type 5 assessment is to generate a pool of what they call PCHSs, which is a potential confidential human source. And it looks just like any other matrix of, potential hiring or anything else. They lay out who they could recruit, and then they rank them based on their access, based on their placement. So how much information they would have access to, the placement, how frequently they have access to this information. And then they sort of decide whether or not they're recruitable or not. And then they go and they target these people. So, in a criminal organization, you may go find a secretary who works in a money laundering operation because she may have access and placement and be susceptible to recruitment. Or you'd find someone who recently went to jail for that. In a church, I don't know who you go and target. Maybe you go get the Eucharistic ministers. Maybe you go and talk to the secretary, to the pastor. But this is, kind of uncharted territory in a lot of ways.
Okay, so this agent was there, type 5 assessment, specifically looking for people he could recruit to get information on other parishioners in the church or whatever. All right, so I want to know, Kyle, who authorizes something like this, a type 5 assessment? Is this just something that anyone in the agency can say, hey, let's do this? Or who actually is all? In other words, did the headquarters in D.C., anyone in D.C. know about this?
Not necessarily. The way these types of operations would work is that you would have somebody propose it, and then it would be approved by a supervisor, a GS-14 level supervisor, which is going to be either a supervisory intelligence analyst or a supervisory and special agent. These are the two types of people that would be able to authorize. And then it would have to be reviewed. This would fall under what's called a sensitive investigative matter, or a SIM. And there's all kinds of people that are SIMs. There are journalists, there are people who are in politics, there are people who are in religious figures or academics. So you'd have to go through an additional scrutiny and review if you were trying to recruit somebody in this area. And that would be reviewed by what's called the Chief Division Counsel. That's the top attorney at every given field office. So of the 56 field offices, there is one attorney where the buck stops, and they give the kind of the green light or the red light on whether or not you can do any particular operation. And that includes opening cases, and that includes recruiting sensitive sources and so on.
Well, thank you, Kyle. Listen, unfortunately, our time is wrapped up. I would love to be able to have further discussion with you somewhere in the future. Just seems to me very difficult to believe something so egregious as targeting churches, violation of so many rules and laws, deeply concerning. But thank you for coming on. I look forward to talking with you in the future.
It was my pleasure.